Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya News headquarters. These are our top stories. President-elect Donald Trump has threatened to reclaim control of the Panama Canal if the country refuses to lower its fees for the shipping routes. And in Germany, questions mount over the deadly Christmas market attack as local authorities face criticism for not taking warnings from Saudi Arabia into account. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has threatened to act with force against Yemen's Houthi militia. To our top story, US President-elect Donald Trump is threatening to retake control of the Panama Canal, accusing the country of charging excessive rates for using the Central American Passage. The Panama Canal sees up to 14,000 ships passing through each year. More importantly, is vital for US imports from Asia and exports of commodities, including liquefied natural gas. Speaking to a crowd of supporters in Arizona, Trump suggested that he could demand the canal be returned to the US, quote, quickly and without question.
We're being ripped off at the Panama Canal like we're being ripped off everywhere else. A secure, he just said take it back. That's a good idea. It was not given for the benefit of others by a token of cooperation, but it was given to Panama and to the people of Panama, but it has provisions. You got to treat us fairly, and they haven't treated us fairly. If the principles, both moral and legal, of this magnanimous gesture of giving are not followed, then we will demand that the Panama Canal be returned to the United States of America in full, quickly, and without question. I'm not going to stand for it.
Our correspondent Mitch McCann with the background and the history.
Less than a month before he takes office, Donald Trump has a new target, Panama, accusing the country of overcharging America for the use of the Panama Canal.
Because we're being ripped off at the Panama Canal like we're being ripped off everywhere else. A secure, he just said take it back. That's a good idea.
The US built the canal in the early 1900s as a means of transporting military and commercial vessels, but handed over control to Panama at the turn of the last century under a treaty signed in 1977 by then-President Jimmy Carter.
When they gave it to Panama, can you believe that? We would never have done it if we thought what's happening now can happen, and we would never, and we will never, ever let it fall into the wrong hands. But it's falling into the wrong hands.
Between 13 and 14,000 ships use the canal every year, mostly from the United States, China, Chile and Japan. Reports say because of droughts severely impacting the water supply to the canal, the number of available slots has decreased and the fees to pass through have increased in recent years. Donald Trump says that's not good enough and is threatening to take back ownership.
You got to treat us fairly, and they haven't treated us fairly. If the principles, both moral and legal, of this magnanimous gesture of giving are not followed, then we will demand that the Panama Canal be returned to the United States of America in full, quickly, and without question. I'm not going to stand for it.
In a video statement released shortly after Mr. Trump's Sunday speech, Panama's president hit back, denouncing his comments. He said, "I want to express that every square metre of the Panama Canal and its adjacent areas belong to Panama and will continue to belong to Panama. The sovereignty and independence of our country are not negotiable," he said. Jose Raul Molino said fees to use the canal are not, quote, set on a whim, and that they consider market conditions, international competition, operating costs and the needs of maintenance. The feud is likely to continue, with Donald Trump then posting an AI-generated image of a US flag in a canal, accompanied by the caption, "Welcome to the United States Canal." Mitch McCann, Al Arabiya News, New York.
For more analysis on Trump's Panama Canal threat, we're joined by the former US Deputy Secretary of Defense, Jim Townsend. Jim, thanks so much for joining us this evening. First of all, a huge diplomatic row brewing, and Trump has not assumed office yet. What do you make of his threats regarding the Panama Canal?
Well, you're right in the sense that he's not even the president yet. We have a president, it's Joe Biden, and this is not something that the U.S. administration has been worried about. This is something that now Trump is taking on, and it's really he's posturing and he's bullying, quite frankly, in a very undiplomatic way. But we got to get used to that. But he's bullying the Panamanians about these transit fees. But as your report points out, you know, it's not just us, it's the Japanese, it's the Chileans, Chinese, others pay this transit fee. And we should all come together and go negotiate something with the Panamanians if there's an issue here. But we shouldn't take out a baseball bat and begin to bully them. That's not the way to start negotiations.
Why do you think Trump has said this? Is it really because of excessive fees or countering Chinese influence?
Well, I can't tell you. I don't know. I don't know what is going through his mind. I don't know if it's just the excessive fees. You know, Trump seems to repeat a lot of things that the last person who he spoke to before going on a rally, he will remember what that last person said to him, and he'll repeat it without any investigation or any truth checking of the situation. So it could very well be that he just heard that there were high fees and that we were being ripped off, and he just repeated that. You know, it might not be based on anything at all. In terms of Chinese influence and that type of thing, well, you know, the Chinese are a tremendous trading partner with the United States. They probably do use the Panama Canal. But I think we have to look at how much is everyone paying for these fees, or is the U.S. being singled out or not? That's what matters. But let's handle this in a negotiation, not with rhetoric and harsh words back and forth.
The reality is Trump is coming into office, and that's something that is 100% happening. But what kind of message is this sending? Is it going to be raising concerns?
Well, I think it's going to be confirming concerns, if anything, because we saw a lot of this in Trump's first term. He's coming now back even more bold and with a lot of rhetoric that he doesn't seem to mind throwing out there, no matter of the impact. So I think what we're seeing is what we need to expect after January 20th, when he's inaugurated, that any efforts he might have thought he was going to make to try to be less, bullying and less rhetorically driven, any chance of him being a little calmer this time around, I think we just saw over the past 24 hours, that won't be the case. We just have to get used to this and know that that's the way he starts things. But then if there's a real problem here, the professionals have to go in there and negotiate a solution to the problem. The rhetoric doesn't do that.
So far, Trump has referred to Canada as a 51st state. He has also set his sights on Greenland. And now, as we've just been talking, threatened Panama in many respects. Do you think that this is an indication of how Trump will treat crucial allies during his second term in power?
Well, I think it is. We'll have to see. It could be that before the inauguration, if he's talking to a rally, he gets into that campaign mode and he says these things. Will he be that way after January 20th? Probably in some ways. And it's something that I don't think he reserves just for countries that are not allies. I think if you're an ally and you have rubbed him the wrong way, he's going to be this harsh on the air. But what does he do when he's not being filmed and there's not a microphone in front of him? What does he do behind closed doors? What do his people do? We have a Secretary of State and a Secretary of Defense and other cabinet officials who will be out there working with these countries. And I hope they're not going to be like that. I think this is just something that comes from the president. But when things are negotiated, when solutions are trying to be found for problems, if we're trying to get allies to come along with us in a certain direction, you can't do that the way Trump does with that microphone. It has to be people in there who know how to work with others. And let's hope that we'll see more of that and less of the rhetoric.
Jim, do you think the team he's chosen to have around him can be the people to do those negotiations?
Some of them. We're going to have to see, because we don't know a lot of them in terms of how they might perform. Marco Rubio, I think, has a better record of being more of a diplomat, or certainly a politician that he can get along with people. He's been reelected a number of times, so obviously he's got a constituency that likes what he says, and so I think we've Hegseth, who's supposed to be who is online to be the Secretary of Defense. We don't know a whole lot about how he will act. We know him from television, this type of thing. We know the people around him can be professional, certainly the civil servants and certainly the diplomats and the military officers. But the other political appointees who are underneath Hegseth in the Pentagon, some of those are known, like Elbridge Colby is known, and he's good. Others we don't know. They've never been in government before, and we'll just have to see how they do. But when it comes to the kind of rhetoric that Trump pumps out, he's really the only one that speaks like that. The others that have been hired on by him for jobs in the administration, I don't think they reach quite his level of rhetorical responses. So let's see how they do once they get into office.
Jim, thank you so much. That was the former US Deputy Secretary of Defense, Jim Townsend, joining us there. Now, grief and anger in the German city of Magdeburg after a man ploughed his car into a crowd of shoppers at a Christmas market, killing 5 people and leaving at least 200 injured. German authorities are due to answer questions about the attack at a parliamentary committee next week. Authorities have identified the suspect as a 50-year-old Saudi psychiatrist named Taleb Abdul-Mohsen, who arrived in Germany in 2006 and received permanent residency. The man identifies himself as a former Muslim and expressed support for the far right. 5 years ago, his work was even highlighted in a BBC interview.
My name is Taleb. I'm from Saudi Arabia. I'm an activist. I created a website to help people seeking asylum, especially from Saudi Arabia and the Gulf region. If I have time, I spend, totally helping Saudi asylum seekers between 10 to 16 hours a day. 90% of people who approach me are women between 18 and 30 years old.
Controversy is brewing over missed warning signs. German media reports reveal that authorities conducted a threat assessment of the suspect a year ago and shockingly found no specific danger. However, there were indications from outside Germany, citing anonymous sources. The German press agency, the DPA, reported that Saudi authorities had warned their German counterparts about the attacker and requested his extradition. These indications seem to have been ignored. Like the Saudi officials, the kingdom's citizens repeatedly warned German authorities about threats made by the Magdeburg suspect on social media. A 24-year-old Saudi female shared some of the alarming posts made by Taleb Abdul-Mohsen, including one where he expressed his desire to kill 20 Germans. She stated that she felt it was her duty as a human to report him. Despite her efforts, they were met with indifference. Elsewhere, German Interior Minister Nancy Faeser has said that investigators are reviewing how authorities responded to earlier warnings about the Magdeburg suspect. It comes as the head of the far-left BSW party demanded Faeser explain why so many tips and warnings were ignored beforehand. And I'm pleased to say Arabiya network has spoken to the Saudi woman who warned the German authorities 1 year before he committed the attack. For more on this, I'm joined here in the studio by Arabiya journalist David Kampmann. David, thank you so much for joining us this evening. First of all, just can you give us an idea about the Saudi lady who initially flagged the suspect?
Yeah, so Talib Abdel Mohsen basically had posted something on X. He had repeatedly beforehand accused German authorities of not fighting religious extremism in the proper way, and basically announced that he would have to do something big. So he asked the rhetorical question, will anyone blame me if I, quote, killed 20 random Germans? So said Saudi lady thought that that was definitely something that deserved attention. So she referred his case to the website of the Office for Migration and Refugees who have an account on X, and they turned it down. They said, well, we are not in charge. This is a law enforcement matter, so you can refer it to the Berlin police. She got in contact with them, according to her statement, and they apparently reacted coldly, if I may quote her, and said, we are not in charge either. You will have to refer to the police in the state of Saxony-Anhalt, where he was residing. So she basically reported the whole thing to the Berlin police once again through a link on X, and that she was given on their official website, if I'm not mistaken, and apparently so to no avail.
But what were her main statements to her in her interview with our colleague, at Al Arabiya News?
Well, her main statements were that she saw the whole thing and said, oh my God, this is a call for murder. This is an announcement of a crime. I worry about those who might be killed, because at the time no one had been killed yet. And so I have to do something. This is why I have to report this, and the authorities have to do something. And in retrospect, she's saying they didn't do enough. They didn't do what was necessary. They should have heard me, and this was not something he said in secret. This was an open statement.
So she was raising concerns there. What have people who have had contact with Talib al-Mohsen in Germany been saying following this attack on the Christmas market, David?
There have been plenty of interviews, or not interviews, plenty of people spoke to the press who had personally had contact with him, professionally mostly, and there are a number of statements, but they all come down to a couple of things. Most people described him as difficult, to say the least, and lots of people said that he was at some point making random accusations against them, truly random, with no grounds, none at all, and accusations that were actually legal accusations. And most of them said we didn't want to have anything more to do with him at this point. Saudi citizens in Germany said, who had been in touch with him, he does not represent us. We want nothing to do with him.
So German security forces faced a series of difficult questions at Saturday's press conference in Magdeburg as senior police officers and city officials faced the press. Some reporters grew impatient with the lack of clear answers to their questions. I just want to know, how has this been reflected in German media, David?
Well, I would say when I take a look at the media, the leading media, I would say they mostly call for moderation at this point, not to be too, I'm not sure how to find the right word, not to be too hysterical at this point, to not let this divide us. Yet, however, there is a large question mark that has been there over and over again about how security handled this case, and lots of calls from news media accusing security institutions of not handling it properly, and calling for improvements, at least, and of shedding light for shedding light onto these latest events.
What about the political feedback from the main parties?
Well, I would say most of them have called for moderation too. However, there are also accusations against security institutions. There are some accusations within the currently still theoretically existing traffic light coalition against each other, who was not handling it properly. And generally, you could say there have also been calls for an improvement of security institutions, cooperation, or at least of shedding light, to shed light onto the latest events of how this could possibly happen.
David Kampmann, thank you so much for joining me in the studio this evening with those insights. Our Al Arabiya journalist, David Kampmann, thank you. Now over to Germany, where the country is still reeling from the terror attack. I'm pleased to say the Alternative for Deutschland MEP Tomasz Froelich joins me now from Brussels. Tomasz, firstly, I just want to say condolences to you and the people in Germany following this attack. I wonder what your initial thoughts once you heard the news of the attack were.
First of all, thank you very much for the invitation, believe it or not, but as an opposition party, we are rarely invited to German television, so this makes it even more ridiculous when our government tries to teach democracy to other countries. My first thoughts, I think you have to think about what leads to a terrorist attack like this. In my eyes, an attack like this is always also the result of one's own weakness. And this weakness is, in my eyes, typical of Western societies in general, and particularly it's typical also of German society. This is, in my opinion, also due to our history, which is repeatedly exploited for moral blackmail, especially by the political left. And this policy and the mentality behind this policy often lead to self-hatred, but also to a naive migration policy and to a naive policy of open borders. I think that left liberalism, which is the dominant ideology of our times in the West, has weakened our society, and it has reached the point where we are unable to prevent and to combat the negative consequences of the migration policy. And terrorist attacks like in Magdeburg are emblematic of this. And the hope now is that people will at least learn from the damage that has been caused.
Do you think this attack was preventable, and who ultimately bears responsibility for this from what we now know?
I'm sure that it was possible to prevent the terrorist attack. You have to keep in mind the chronology of Taleb Abdul Mohsen after coming to Germany. In 2006, Taleb Abdul Mohsen, I hope my pronunciation of the name is right, you know it better than me, but in 2006, he fled to Germany from Saudi Arabia after committing serious crimes in Saudi Arabia. In 2013, he was convicted in Germany for disturbing the public peace by threatening criminal acts. At the very latest, he should have been deported at this time. But nevertheless, in 2016, he applied for asylum and asylum was granted. So the authorities in Saudi Arabia repeatedly warned the German authorities about him. Multiple requests for his extradition were ignored by the German authorities. And I think this is a scandal. In the meantime, he was interviewed by Western media, for example, by the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung or by the BBC, and he was presented as a model migrant. But over the years, he made politically very vague statements. He described himself as a leftist. I think 8 days before the terrorist attack, he gave an interview to an American media, and he described himself as a leftist. In the past, he worked as a refugee helper and shared also some pro-LGBT friendly views on his social media. But in the meantime, he also cryptically announced an attack, but this was ignored by the German authorities. Why was it ignored? Because the German authorities are too focused on fighting government critics and patriots in Germany. This is one of the biggest problems. So there is a wrong focus by the German authorities, and they ignored all the warnings. And I think this is a big problem, a huge problem, and I think that this terrorist attack could be prevented.
Do you think this terror attack will change the political landscape in Germany? There are upcoming elections. What is your feeling at the moment, and what is the feeling on the ground in Germany?
I think this will change a lot, because now it's a very interesting situation we have in Germany right now, because the media are now attempting to label the terrorist Taleb Abdul Mohsen as far-right extremist, and they try to shift blame for the attack onto the AfD, so onto my party of the political right, because he also tweeted 2 or 3 more right-wing content on his social media. But what is also ignored is that, or what is completely ignored, is that he also shared anti-German content, and he accused, for example, Germany of not accepting more migrants from Saudi Arabia. So people know that, in fact, he never should have been in Germany, and that he should have been extradited, expelled to Saudi Arabia. So I think that people will not believe in the narratives that are spread by the Western mass media right now. And I think that this will lead to a swift regarding the migration policy, because it's not the first attack. Remember, I think in June, there was also a terrorist attack in Mannheim. And the result was that the AfD, the Conservative Patriotic Party, which is critical towards migration, that our party get more and more votes, that our party increased in the polls. So, and I think this will be the same effect here after the terrorist attack in Mannheim.
Tomasz Froelich, thank you so much for joining me from Brussels. The Alternative for Deutschland MEP there, Tomasz Froelich. I'm now joined from Berlin by a member of Germany's Christian Democratic Union Party and expert in international security, Mustafa Al-Ammar. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Firstly, was the reason for the German authorities not dealing with the Saudi woman's tip-off, and especially the official Saudi warning, was this political, in your opinion, or was it a security one?
Well, good evening. Thank you for having me. Well, it's a very strategic now. What we are facing is a big threat that we are facing, especially in our security and our society. It's both, as you mentioned, that is not only the political, but is a political and also security policy. Because first of all, politically, they didn't take it regarding the diplomatic ideology, and also about the security section or the security policy, because of the lack of the information that been dealing or exchange between the federal and also the domestic departments. So this is the both things. I think is not only from one side, and as you see, that's it. We haven't learned actually from what happened earlier this year, and also since 8 years since what's happened also at the semi-tragic act in the Christmas market in Berlin. And I think now we need to deal more seriously with the warning from abroad, with our allies from different countries, because otherwise we are not taking responsibility, and also not being credible by another partners worldwide.
Lawmakers are to question intelligence agencies. Are politicians about to discover their intellectual approach to the issue of immigration, especially when it comes to asylum?
Well, we cannot just ignore one side and focus on another side. It's a big challenge for all of us in Germany. It's also for Europe. We cannot, we're hiding ourselves, and we're not taking responsibility from the world, and we are not taking care of the people who's coming to us, because our constitution putting the dignity and the human right on the top of our priority. But we need much practically, and we need much flexibility on the resolution, and also how taking responsibility with the security. This is a different types what we are talking here, because security, it's needing really to deal with every warning, and need to be also to focusing on the solution, not ignoring the security and just focusing on the immigration to find this as a big problem for us.
In an invitation to a rally, the AfD claimed that the recent attack highlights the dangers of Germany's immigration policy. And obviously, I was just speaking earlier about that issue. How true could this actually be?
Well, the other party which they are also against us, against me and my colleagues, as we are with the immigration background, and they want to do the re-immigration. That means when they come to the charter or when ruling the country, they want also to depart us or to send us to one of Enzil and to keep us there or to jail us. So this is not a human right what they are wanting. Instead of just focusing on the immigration policy, they need also to focusing also of the security policy. We need to improve our security system. We need to give more authority for our judge. We need to give more for authority also for the security forces. We need the development. We haven't that much development at all. We haven't that stronger exchange with different countries.
So development when it comes to security, but how much will what has happened in Germany really affect the political landscape ahead? We know there's upcoming elections. Olaf Scholz's coalition has been under threat in many ways.
Well, Olaf Scholz, he haven't been, I would say that much, he lose the chance, let me say. Let me talk also to you, frankly, that he's not the person that he really to lead Germany or to make Germany in the front. Unfortunately, with Olaf Scholz, we lost a lot of credibility in the world. Also, he's not the face of the leadership in the country, and that's why it's caused a lot of problem in the countries. And also, there is a shortage with the budget. We have Olaf Scholz his promises was very, very hot in the beginning, but he haven't seen or he haven't fixed any problem in the country. Instead of fixing the problems, he's himself or his party is the problem for the leadership. And more than that, I think Thomas Hobbes said in the back in the history, he said, hell is the truth. Haven't seen yet. So I think now I hope they can see now the hell, they can see the truth and how to think or how to provide a new security model or how to make a new security system in our country. But this will take a lot of time because this is not an easy task to take, but it's need also to focus on our security and also how to give the responsibility for our system to increase and to increase the problems in the countries. But I don't think that Olaf Scholz will lead the country again. Our party with the Friedrich Merz, I think we are in the front and we are going to take the responsibility because we know what the human need. We know the nation, how to protect the nation, and we know how to be in the same level and the standard security with the other countries in the world.
Democratic Union Party and expert in international security, Mustafa Al-Ammar, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Now, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed to retaliate against Yemen's Houthi militia after it fired a missile at Tel Aviv, warning that Israel would target what he described as the last remaining arm of Iran's axis of evil. The Houthis struck Israel's commercial hub yesterday with what they claimed was a ballistic missile, injuring 16 people and forcing many to leave their homes following the pre-dawn attack.
Just as we acted forcefully against the terrorist arms of Iran's axis of evil, so we will act against the Houthis. Only in this case, we are not acting alone. The US and other countries see the Houthis as a threat not only to international shipping, but also to the international order. Therefore, we will act forcefully with determination and sophistication. I tell you, even if it takes time, the results will be the same, just as against the other terrorist arms.
I'm joined from Tel Aviv by our correspondent Trent Murray. Trent, thanks so much for joining me this evening. First of all, the Israeli Prime Minister with some tough words against Yemen's Houthi militants today. Can you share a bit of what he said exactly?
Well, probably no surprise. We've become quite accustomed to these types of speeches from Benjamin Netanyahu. Very strong language suggesting that Israel is preparing for further attacks in Yemen. Now, of course, that comes after those 2 ballistic missile attacks that we saw last week in as many days, both hitting just before 3 a.m., which is why it's thought there have been no deaths or serious injuries. The missiles hit a primary school as well as a playground, but given the time of day, there was only light injuries reported. But certainly the suggestion now and the rhetoric from the Israelis is that they are now focusing on those Yemen-based Houthis after spending 14 months at war with Hamas in Gaza and, of course, Hezbollah in Lebanon. They now seem to be targeting their focus on Yemen. We've seen some initial airstrikes already from them in response to that missile, but the suggestion that we just heard there from Prime Minister Netanyahu is that more is coming.
Have the Houthis reacted at all recently to these airstrikes, and is there any indication they are capable, their capabilities have been damaged, Trent?
Well, I mean, they certainly claimed responsibility for the firing of those 2 ballistic missiles. They say they were targeting military strikes, and then just today, the IDF says it intercepted 2 drones which had been fired, towards Israel from Yemen. Now, the Houthis have just put out a statement, actually, I was just reading it in the past hour again, claiming responsibility. So it would appear, despite the strong language and the threats coming from the Israeli government, they are showing no signs of backing off. They say they're doing this in solidarity with the people of Gaza, given that they've been under siege now for 14 months. But we should also be clear, the IDF has been hitting Yemen pretty hard. They hit Sana'a for the first time, the Yemeni capital. They also hit the port city of Hodeidah. It is thought that they targeted effectively the main ports that the Houthis were using crucially to make money, exporting and importing goods. So it's of course not just the Israelis doing this. We know the British and the US are also joined in that coalition to try and protect international shipping in the Red Sea. But despite these 3 major military heavyweights now attacking the Houthis, there is no suggestion from them that they're going to stop this action anytime soon. In fact, their rhetoric suggests that they're going to continue it even further.
Trent Murray, our correspondent in Tel Aviv, thank you so much for joining us. Let's take a look at some of the other stories making the headlines today. The far-right AfD has held a rally in Magdeburg today following the Christmas market terror attack which left 5 people dead on Friday. German lawmakers are set to question the country's foreign and domestic intelligence agencies next week as questions remain over the failure to act on past warnings over the perpetrator. Oxfam has accused Israel of relentlessly using starvation as a weapon of war in Gaza. The organisation says only 12 trucks of food and water have been allowed to enter the besieged Palestinian territory in the past 2.5 months. Israel has rejected the report, saying it was deliberately ignoring their humanitarian efforts. Now, Iran has been hit by what experts are calling a dire energy crisis that has forced businesses and government institutions, including schools, to halt operations. Reports suggest the reasons could be due to a lack of investment in critical infrastructure, sanctions on the economy, and the recent Israeli airstrikes across the country. North Korea may be preparing to send more troops and weapons, including suicide drones, to Russia to support Vladimir Putin's war against Ukraine, according to South Korean military. Seoul says Pyongyang has already supplied multiple rocket launchers and weapons to Russia, as well as 12,000 soldiers. Meanwhile, reports suggest around 1,100 North Korean troops have been killed or wounded in the Kursk region. Ministers from Jordan and Qatar have held meetings with Syria's new leader Ahmed al-Sharaa in Damascus today. Jordan's foreign minister said the country stands ready to help Syria rebuild following years of isolation under President Bashar al-Assad. They are among the first high-ranking Arab diplomats to visit the country. Now, a reminder of our top stories today. President-elect Donald Trump has threatened to reclaim control of the Panama Canal if the country refuses to lower its fees for the shipping route. And in Germany, questions mount over the deadly Christmas market attack as local authorities face criticism for not taking warnings from Saudi Arabia into account. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has threatened to act with force against Yemen's Houthi militia. And that's all from us on W News. Thanks so much for joining us. Coming up next is Ruz Khan. And don't miss Tom Burgess-Watson with GNT. We'll see you all again tomorrow. Good night and thank you.